Hey everybody, John here. Today I'm going to talk about how to afford a Tesla. So first of all, a Tesla vehicle is a big purchase. And even if you have a lot of money, it's still a big purchase. You could be extremely wealthy or very poor, and it's still a big purchase. So how do you afford it? So if you're on the poor end or you're kind of middle class, like me, I'm middle class. I grew up pinching pennies. My dad, he would always drive cars that he paid maybe, well, there's, inflation has taken over pretty big, but I mean, he probably spent maximum $2,000 for a car back then. He would always fix the cars by himself. And when we'd be on road trips as a family, he'd pull over on the side of the highway and pick up 10-cent cans, because in Michigan you can get a refund for recycling soda cans, or in Michigan as they call them, pop cans. So we would be on a family trip, 5 of us, me, my brother and sister in the back seat of the car, my mom and dad in the front, and he'd just pull over on the side of the street, on the side of the highway, when he'd see a can to pick it up for 10 cents. This used to drive me crazy. So he mastered the art of saving money. And he was extremely frugal. In the winter, he'd turn the heat down. It would be freezing cold in our house, and it would annoy the crap out of us. He would turn off the lights every chance he could. This is how I grew up. So in the summer, very rarely, if ever, did we use the air conditioning. There's so many sacrifices that we had. Now, back then, there was no internet, there was no cable TV. A lot of those expenses, those monthly expenses, weren't there. But if they had been there, I guarantee you my father would not have paid for them. So, long story short, I grew up surrounded by not poverty, but definitely middle class. So my dad was an architect for the public school system. He was doing decently, but not great. My mother was working from home. Later on, she was a librarian and started taking some other jobs. So my parents knew that it was important. A college education was important. And I will say, first and foremost, that if you are struggling to afford a Tesla or dreaming of owning a Tesla one day, the first thing and the best thing that you should do for yourself is to invest in yourself. And by that I mean put in the time and effort to get an education. You're going to take out loans to do that, but it does get you to the next step while you're in college. So first of all, before you go to college, maybe you're outside of college. So in my case, I got my Model 3 in 2019. So I was 39 years old when I got my Model 3. So pretty late in life. Now, prior to that, I probably never would have been able to afford it. So you have to be pretty driven financially to be able to afford a Tesla Model 3. But first step is to get a college education. And in my opinion, you need to work your butt off to be able to afford that and try to avoid as much debt as possible. And to do that, you can get a work-study job during college. I was a resident advisor during college. That saved on room and board. I still had to pay tuition, but it was in-state tuition. If you can, go to a college that's in-state. That will help a lot. A lot of these little hacks you can make to kind of save and be frugal, like my father was. But that's just half of the equation. So the other half is making money. And now, if you can master the art of having multiple income streams, that is the ideal situation. Not so easy, but definitely something that is worthy of exploration. So think of automating things. I'm a big fan of automation. So if you can automate the sale of a product, maybe it's a digital product, it could be even a YouTube channel, something that you want to invest some time in, but it has to be something that you're passionate about. So maybe you want to write a book. Maybe in a blog you're going to release some sort of like quick start guide or Cliff's Notes of this or this or the other. You have to be creative a little bit and come up with your own product. Now, I have not mastered that, to be honest with you. My engineering degree at the University of Michigan did help. And that was a tremendous leap forward for me professionally to be able to start saving money. So the first step is save money and be frugal. The second step is to invest your money. Okay, and so along with multiple income streams, which again is hard, it's not always easy. There's real estate and other things as well. But if you can invest your money in stocks and other forms of investment, and by the way, always, and I'm not providing financial advice. I'm not a financial expert. I am passionate about finance, and when I was 28 years old, I first got started investing. I wish I had gotten started a lot earlier, but as soon as my savings grew to a certain point, I said to myself, "Hey, I've got $10,000 in the bank, and it's just sitting there. That's not good." Like, I felt uneasy about that because I wasn't using it. It's not like I was saving it particularly for a rainy day, but I felt uneasy that it was just sitting there. So I knew the importance of a Roth IRA. It always kind of like was, that's like a retirement account. When you're in your 20s, you're not thinking about retirement. But a Roth IRA is one important step of investing, as well as a 401k. When you get a job, make sure that you're maxing out your 401k, maxing out is really difficult because the limit is pretty high, but at least invest as much as your company will match. So if it's 5% or 6%, put in that much at a minimum. In Roth IRA, any extra income you have, max that out. So the reason why I say to max these out is because that is tax-free money, whether it's pre-tax or post-tax. Definitely do that. I know this is boring, but believe me, this counts. So that is to secure your retirement. Okay, now you, in my opinion, everybody's going to have different opinions on this, but in my opinion, you really should not be spending money on an expensive car unless you have a base foundation. And a base foundation is a solid start to a secure retirement. Okay, so although these retirement accounts are not going to help you particularly afford a Tesla, they are a foundation upon which you can build upon. And by that I mean the importance of investing, so that now that you have your 401k, you have your Roth IRA, what else can I invest in? It's just like, what other sources of income can I obtain? You have to look at all. Basically, if you've ever heard the phrase, don't put all your eggs in one basket, you want to have a lot of baskets. You want to diversify yourself. You want to make sure that you have enough buckets to pull from, enough opportunities to grow. So that includes stocks. It could include real estate. It's another area I have not gotten into, but I guarantee you, if you were to survey a vast majority of owners that have Tesla vehicles, probably a good percentage of them have real estate investments. So investments are important. So when I graduated from college, my graduate student instructor, my GSI, he sent out an email to everybody right after graduating saying, "Hey, I know that you're all entering the workforce. I wish someone had told me about this, but add this to your reading list. Make sure you check this out." And it was a book called Think Big, Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And I went out and purchased it right away and read it. I made it maybe 80% of the way through the book, and I was like, this is boring, and this is common sense, and this is stupid. It's not me. But essentially the gist of that book was create a goal for yourself, a financial goal. Like, let's say you want to make $1 million. Set that goal. If you don't have a goal, you're never going to have any drive to achieve it. So setting a goal for yourself is important. It's just like defining who you want to be in life. If you have no clue what you want to be or what you want to do, you'll wander around and be lost your whole entire life. You have to kind of say, okay, hey, I want to be a scientist, or I want to be an engineer, or I want to be a writer, or I want to be an astrologist. Whatever it is, you have to work toward that goal to achieve it. So same thing with that goal, with a career-driven goal, you should have a financial goal. And that was the whole point of the book, is know what that is early on so that you can achieve it. and make the steps to achieve it. Now, the book didn't go into detail on how to get to that goal, but it did talk about the importance of having a goal. Okay, so that one I was like, okay, yeah, whatever, and I never really formulated a solid amount, a target amount, because I'm like, that's really kind of materialistic, or I didn't really think that highly of it. Then later I read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Richard, what's his name? Richard Kiyosaki, I think. I'm probably getting his name wrong. Robert Kiyosaki, I think it is. And that book was really, really interesting because it talked about a father who had a really great background going to school, and then another father who kind of started working early and kind of didn't even go to college, and then climbed up the ladder. And guess which father did better? It was the guy that didn't go to college, but he was driven, and he knew that he wanted to make a lot of money, and he set that goal for himself. Whereas the guy that went and became a PhD, he was like, oh, I got to study, but he never really thought in his mind that it's important to make money. He never really formulated it, so he never got ahead. So the point here is that you need to have a goal, and that goal has to be, and it could be as loose as, hey, I want to get rich. Whatever rich is to you. And again, I don't think you need to have a concrete goal like, say, hey, I want to get 3-4 million. Now, I will tell you that my parents, they are going through some hardships with health right now, particularly my father, and they're working with some estate planners, and they basically said that you would be all set if you had $4 or $5 million in the bank. But because you don't have $4 or $5 million in the bank, life's going to be a little bit tricky, and basically you're going to lose all your money. is the gist of what they were saying. So I think on that spectrum, when it comes to retirement, it's a hard one. You know, it's either you're really, really, really poor and don't have any money, and then the government takes care of you through Medicare, Medicaid, and you just kind of coast through that, everything paid for you. Or you're extremely rich, and maybe you live in a much more luxurious place, but again, you're taken care of. If you're kind of middle class and you have, 1 to 3 or 4 million in that range, or even less than 1 million, you're going to struggle. You're going to lose all your money, and all your retirement, everything that you had hoped for in retirement is going to be gone if a disaster were to happen. So I think it is important to have a goal, and don't think, oh man, $1 million, that's a lot of money. It is when you're young, but when you're older, it's really not that much, especially today. So today's $1 million is equivalent to $4 or $5 million. So I would say if you're going to create a goal for yourself, definitely set a high goal. I would go for, probably 7 million or something. Now, I don't have a goal like that. I probably should. But so right now I'm 42. And like I said, I wasn't able to get a Tesla until I was 39. And it was a very tough decision for me, because the most I had ever paid for a car prior to that was $10,000. And I bought used cars my entire life. It's not that I bought that many of them. I had a Nissan Versa that was $10,000. I had a Kia Optima that was $7,000. Drove that for a while, but really didn't have too many cars, to be honest with you. 2 cars, and I would run them into the ground. I wasn't one that would like move around from one. And another thing is, if you really want to be able to afford a car, try to avoid having too many leases or too many things where you're continually having to pay these monthly payments, because those really drag you down. And what I mean by dragging you down is it doesn't allow you to save money. So a lot of the people that you'll see that own Teslas, they've made a lot of sacrifices early on in life. Whereas some people, you may see them bragging, saying, oh, I got this nice flashy new car, and they don't talk to you about their monthly payment. But they are hurting more so financially than the people that are, very patient and saving their money. So try to avoid a really high cable bill. Try to avoid a really expensive internet bill if you can. Try to avoid some of these expenses. And if you really can't get around those expenses in order to save money, then you need to focus. And let's say you really don't want to do that. That's fine. then you really need to focus all your energy on making more money. That's what I should probably focus more on. I'm kind of a blend, but I think I'm more focused on saving money than I am making money. But investing is a passion of mine, and that is how I was able to afford my Model 3. So to cut to the chase with all of this, my story here, to be able to afford my Model 3, I first of all, when I saw the price was $35,000, I was like, hey, I could do that. I really thought that was going to be possible. But then when the Model 3 launched in 2018, it was like 46,000. My dream was shattered. I was like, oh my gosh. And I actually withdrew my deposit at one point in early 2019. I was so disappointed that I couldn't afford the car that I really had wanted, I had had on reservation for 2 years. I was so mad, and it just bothered me like crazy. So I had to justify it somehow, and I'll tell you exactly how I did that. Well, first of all, it never got down to $35,000 until March 2019, and by the time it did get down to that level, the range was so bad, and it didn't come with a lot of things that I wanted, like autopilot was a separate purchase, and navigate on autopilot was a separate purchase, and all these cool features that I had wanted to get initially that Elon Musk kind of he didn't promise, but he hinted that, oh, and by the way, right after he said it was $35,000, and by the way, these cars will have full self-driving. And I was like, oh, yes, that's what I put my deposit in. I was like, yes, and that's what I've always wanted, is a really smart car. A high-tech car was my dream, and as well as a minimalistic car, and one that requires less maintenance. So to justify the purchase of an electric vehicle, such as a Tesla Model 3, which is the lowest cost Tesla, by the way, you have to, in your mind, understand that long-term you're going to be saving a lot of money. So if you're the type of person that maybe you're not making huge amounts of money, and again, you're struggling a little bit to make that decision of getting a new car, because it is an investment that does not typically appreciate in value. And typically a good investment, so a good loan, if you will, is like an educational loan, because it's a low rate that you have to pay the money back. Those are favorable. It's still a liability, but it's a positive liability, if that makes any sense. So there's assets and liabilities. There's another book that I read called Millionaire by 30. I can't remember the authors, but that jumped out at me, and there's some great principles in there about assets and liabilities. So it's important to understand what the liabilities are and how to avoid them. So you really don't want to be bogged down with tons of payments. And again, that's where that monthly payment really pulls you down. So when I had to justify to myself that it's not going to be $35,000, I'm going to have to pay $46,000 to $50,000 at the time, I was like, oh, how am I ever going to do this? So I had to crunch the numbers. And this is where I busted out my Excel spreadsheet, and I was putting in all the numbers. How am I going to make this down payment? And to be honest, I haven't admitted this to anybody, I don't have a car payment. So I'm one of the lucky ones that doesn't have a car payment. And I'll tell you how I did it. And by the way, that is the best way to own a car. You really, like I said, you want to eliminate those monthly payments. So how in the world can you come up with $50,000 to put down on a car? How in the world is that possible? Especially if you own a home and you've got 3 kids like I do. How do you make that possible? Well, I'll tell you how you make it possible. It comes back to the don't put all your eggs in one basket. Invest in a lot of things. Investing is key. And maximizing your income. If you can master both of those things, you will be able to afford a Tesla. Guaranteed. You have to start early, so time works to your advantage. Compound interest, dividend stocks, all of these things. So now you're thinking, okay, well, John's being a little bit vague here. I still don't understand how I can afford this car. Investing, great. Making money, great. So this is my personal experience. This is what I did, and I got a little bit lucky, but again, it came down to diversifying my investments. I put some money in some real estate investment trusts, also known as REITs. I put my money in dividend stocks. I put my money in index funds. I put my money in gold. I put my money in Bitcoin. And that Bitcoin really, really saved me. And again, it's little bits here and there. And if you can afford to pay yourself first, just like investing in yourself by getting an education, focus on you, invest in yourself. If you can put money aside every single month and force yourself to not spend it. So if you have your money and you're in a bad habit of spending it, force yourself not to spend it by locking it away. And one way to do that is to automate your investing. And there's several platforms that allow you to do that. Fidelity is one. SoFi is another great bank account. In fact, they have a great interest rate. Try to automate your finances as best you can. So if you can automate where you're taking away money, so you never even see it in the first place, then you're not going to spend it, right? So if you can do that and you can take that money and set it aside and invest it in dividend stocks and places where your money is going to grow over time, and I'm talking many, many years, again, start early, then you're going to come out ahead. So in my case, my personal case, because I was investing in all these little things, I didn't know which one was going to go up, which one was going to go down, but I had a whole bunch of them spread out. So I put $1,000 in Bitcoin, I put $1,000 in Facebook stock, I put $1,000 in Alibaba and Apple, I put $1,000 here, just throwing it all over the place. And some of them did really well, other ones didn't do so great. But most of them did pretty well. And I think you'll find that over 10 years, over 20 years, they do really well. Especially if you invest in something like the S&P 500. The S&P 500 has a track record of doing very, very, very well long term. Short term, you never know. But the way that I forwarded it, and sorry I haven't cut to the chase here, is I put $1,000 in Bitcoin in 2015. One Bitcoin back at the time was $380. So I was able to get, it was actually a little bit more than $1,000, but I wanted to have 3 Bitcoin. And you could get like partial Bitcoin. You could buy however many dollars you want of Bitcoin. It would be like 0.5 Bitcoin or 0.6 Bitcoin. You don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin. But at the time I was like, it would be cool to own 3 of them. So I rounded off to 3, and that was a little bit more than $1,000. Well, that $1,000 investment in 3 years grew to $60,000. So I was freaking out. I was like, holy cow, like, look what just happened here. So I said to myself, this is great. I never expected this, ever. And I said, I want to get this car. I'm going to take 1 Bitcoin out. So there are $20,000. That helped to pay for the car. I also then, at that time, had been investing in several other stocks, including Apple, Disney, Alibaba, and Tesla. So those 4 stocks I sold, and that was the remaining $30,000. And that was, by the way, gains. So I did not lose any of my principal. So 30 plus 20, $50,000, I had my Tesla. So point is, and I got lucky with Bitcoin, by the way, but point is, start early, invest, diversify. Start early, invest, diversify. And if you can maximize your income sources, that will also help. So I apologize for going on a tangent about money, but ultimately, to afford a Tesla Model 3, you have to talk about money. This is not investment advice, but that is my personal story on how I afforded my Model 3. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any comments, let me know. I'd be very interested to hear about how you afforded your Tesla if you have a Tesla. I'm always envious of people that have like a Model X, or, some people probably look at me and they're like, that guy's rich, he's got a Tesla. I look at other Tesla owners and I think, that guy's rich, he's got a Model X, or he's got even a Model Y is pretty expensive. So it's all relative. Some people have a ton of money, other people not so much. But I will say that if you can afford a Tesla, you're doing pretty good for yourself. It is not a cheap purchase. And a lot of owners forget that. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, that the majority of people cannot still today afford a Tesla. But with some discipline and with some goals and with some best practices, you can afford a Tesla. It is possible, and I believe in you, and I know you can do it. So good luck, and I hope to hear from you about your experience being able to purchase a Tesla in the future. And thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.